Hey guys, welcome back to this YouTube channel where we'll be discussing all things related to Social Security disability. And today I'm going to be giving you guys some tips on how to strengthen your case and to basically increase your chances of winning benefits when you do apply. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do is find your own doctor and make sure that you are continuing to always receive medical treatment throughout the duration of your case. You got to remember that ultimately your case is going to be decided almost entirely based off of the information in your medical records. And so if you're not seeing a doctor or seeing a medical provider at all, you're going to get denied almost every time. You know, if you don't have insurance, one thing that I recommend to my clients is that they apply for Medicaid through the state. Most states have expanded Medicaid benefits and you can easily apply online. And like I said, most of my clients do meet the qualifications for Medicaid. If for whatever reason you don't qualify for Medicaid, my second recommendation would be to go to needymeds.org, and there you can enter in your zip code and it will pull up a list of free or cheap clinics in your area, and a lot of my clients have used those facilities as well, and we've been, they're great. A lot of them are very, very supportive and will help even out with your case. So I definitely would recommend that. Another piece of advice I would just give you is build a relationship with your doctor. If you are applying for disability and you have a supportive doctor who's willing to write a letter for you or fill out a form, that's going to really make the difference in your case. If you don't have a supportive doctor, Social Security is going to rely on one of their doctor's opinions to decide your case. And as you can probably imagine, the doctors who work for Social Security, or I guess they're contracted out with Social Security, are typically not very claimant friendly, we'll say. And so, like I said, the best way to kind of combat that is to have your own doctor who's treating you, because then that doctor knows you. He or she has a better understanding of what you're going through medically than one of the Social Security doctors who might just only read your medical records or do a quick evaluation on you and try to decide what your physical or mental limitations are. It just works out a lot better. The other thing I would just recommend is have your medical provider fill out what's called a residual functional capacity assessment. And if it's a mental health case, you want them to fill out a mental capacity assessment. And I'll link those documents at the bottom of this video. It's basically just an opinion form that your doctor or your provider can fill out, and it just kind of specifies what limitations you have, so it will go over things like how much weight are you able to lift. Are you able to use your arms, your hands, your legs? Are you able to push, pull, crouch, crawl, things of that nature? And in the mental health side, they're looking at things like, do you have a hard time interacting with the general public? Do you have a hard time with concentration, memory, things of that nature? So that will kind of spell out what Social Security is looking for in the format that they're looking for as well. So notice that I've been saying doctor most of the time, and this is not to knock any physician's assistants or nurse practitioners, but I always think it's better to find a licensed physician. You want an MD, a DO, if a psychologist, a doctor of physical therapy. And the reason being is because Social Security will almost always have a physician or a doctor of some sort who is going to be making an opinion on your case. And in my experience, a nurse practitioner's opinion versus a doctor, they're almost always going to go with the doctor's opinion. So I know that they recently changed the rules where they accept PA's opinions and nurse practitioners' opinions in a more conducive way, but I still think it's always going to be better to find a physician, a doctor. So when you do find a doctor, or if you're treating with a doctor, just make sure that you are compliant with treatment. So if the physician prescribes medication for you, make sure you're taking it as recommended or prescribed. If you abuse the medication or take more, take less than you're supposed to, and there is a note about that in your medical records, one very easy argument Social Security can make is, well, you're not complying with medical treatment, so how do we know that you wouldn't be able to work if you weren't on the prescribed treatment, if that makes sense. So just make sure that you're doing that. If whatever prescribed treatment isn't working for you, make sure you just discuss that with your medical provider rather than unilaterally changing your treatment plan. And then the other thing I just want to say is, obviously you want to be honest with your doctors about what you're dealing with, but just remember that what you say to your doctors is going to show up in your medical records. And so what I mean by that is, if you go on a short walk every day, half a block, don't tell your doctor you went on a short hike. You want to be kind of careful and make sure that you're being very specific about what you're doing, because Social Security, if they love to find things like that in your medical records. If they see the word hike, they're never going to let you forget it. So just kind of be aware of that. Another thing is make sure that you're discussing with your medical provider all of the medical conditions that you are dealing with. So I know a lot of people have some complex medical issues and they're dealing with a lot of things at once, but it's really important that you talk to your doctor about all of those issues, because if there's no evidence of an impairment, you can't argue that with Social Security. So as an example, if you are trying to apply for disability because you have depression and anxiety, but let's say 2 years ago you had a carpal tunnel surgery, well, that's going to be really important evidence to have, especially if you're still having some issues with your hands, even if they're more minor than your mental health, because this is all about eliminating the jobs that Social Security can say you're able to do. And so that's why you just want to make sure that you include everything, because they'll take into consideration the combination of all of your impairments. One other piece of advice I would just give everybody: if you have only a physical case, so let's say you have a bad back, you're having some neuropathy, whatever the case may be, I always recommend to people to seek out mental health care. And, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and there's really not a client that I have ever met that doesn't have depression and anxiety. And that is just because if somebody is dealing with a chronic medical issue and they're not able to get out and do the things that they used to be able to do, it's almost kind of a natural human response to have some anxiety and depression. And I know it seems kind of weird, but it's really important to have evidence of that, especially for these disability cases, because like I was saying earlier, if you have anxiety, let's say, and you are triggered, your anxiety is triggered by crowds of people or dealing with the general public. Well, if you're not able to deal with the general public on a regular basis, on a pretty consistent basis, that's going to eliminate a lot of jobs that Social Security can say you're able to do. So it's going to be really important to develop that. And you would do that by seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and even get weekly counseling if you're able to. One other thing is, on the topic of mental health, if there is any drug abuse or alcohol abuse in your evidence, in your medical records, Social Security will always bring that up, because the way they look at it, and obviously I don't agree with this, but if somebody is doing cocaine, let's say, while they're trying to file for disability, and they're alleging a mental health impairment, Social Security will come back and say, well, how do you know that the cocaine isn't causing you the mental health issues? And so, that's something they use all the time. So if that is an issue for you, make sure that you just have a period of sobriety, and they'll look at that period of sobriety, say 6 months to 12 months. And if you're still having the same problems, or if they're even worse during that period of sobriety, then you have a good argument that the drugs aren't causing the problems. But otherwise, you want to kind of be careful with that, because they will almost always point that out. One other thing is vocational rehabilitation is a great resource. If you're not familiar with what vocational rehabilitation is, it's a program through each state, usually the Department of Workforce Services, and it's kind of like special job training, and that is helpful because a lot of my clients have gone to vocational rehab. They'll do the initial assessment. Sometimes they'll even pay for medical evaluations, but a lot of times they'll come back and say, well, there's really no jobs that we can find that you're able to do. And as you can probably imagine, having something like that would be incredibly good evidence for these types of cases, because it essentially says you can't work. And then the other thing is, I know that people are waiting a long time typically when they're going through this process, the Social Security disability application process. But any working can hurt somebody's case. I get this question a lot. And, you know, the general rule of thumb, it changes every year, but you are technically allowed to work. But if you're making about $1,000 a month, and that's, you know, that's kind of my general rule, it changes every year, and that's before taxes are taken out, then Social Security might just say, well, you're gainfully employed. Why would we pay you disability benefits if you're employed and you're making full-time earnings according to their rules? So you know, the closer you get to that $1,000 a month, the less likely it is that your application is going to be granted. So if you are able to hold out, you know, possibly stay with family members, you know, rely on others to kind of help you, you know, that's what a lot of people do. And then when they get their back pay money from their case, which, you know, typically in most cases, if your case is awarded, Social Security will pay you for all that time that you're waiting, all of those months. And so, you know, you can work out deals where if you are awarded later, you can repay them, you know, but in the past, that's what a lot of my clients have done. So, and then the other thing is, if you get better, so let's say you file in 2021 in January, and then in January of 2022, you have a surgery and you have some medical improvement. Well, and you're able to find a full-time job. Well, that's great. You're going to make more money working full-time, but what you should do is still don't withdraw your disability application, because if you have at least a year of disability where you weren't able to work, you can still argue your case that you were disabled for that year or longer, and you can ask Social Security to pay you. It's called a closed period. And I've had a lot of success with that, and I think that they are more willing to grant those types of cases because people are going back to work. They're not just relying on the benefits, you know, for a longer period of time. So, and I get this question a lot. The same really goes kind of with education, you know. While you're waiting for your application to progress through the system, if you are going to school full-time, you know, that basically demonstrates that you can do a full-time job. So, you know, you're doing homework assignments and going to class and you know, all of these different things. And, you know, it's very hard to win a disability application if you are going to school full-time. So I hope these have been helpful to you. If you liked the information you heard in this video, go ahead and give us a like, and we'll see you next time for more content.